Atlantic Ocean. That is where the cousins play, upon the beach at Silver Strand. My toes curled into Irish sand gave to me the crazy notion they might swim to this far land.
Nearest cousins
Wrote to her, they said our land is lost to war. We had to make for Tripoli, we could not stay there anymore. The bombs have pulled the buildings down, grass and rubble strewn around. We looked for safety on the sea, shelter on a foreign ground. Some cousins live their lives in peace, while some must brave the angry seas. This country is where people come to make new lives, raise families. The cousins come from far away, we may see them any day. They cross the cold Atlantic Ocean to find the place where children play. They come to us from many lands, we reach out to grasp their hands. Friendship is a simple notion everyone may understand. Some cousins live their lives in peace, while some must brave the angry seas. This country is where people come to make new lives, raise families. When all the world is on the move, will we yet open-hearted prove and welcome those tossed by the storm? With warm hearts full of cousins' love, we welcome those tossed by the storm. With warm hearts full of cousins' love. cousins live so far away. We do not see them every day. Across the cold Atlantic Ocean, that is where the cousins play. Upon the beach at Silver Strand, my toes curled into Irish sand gave to me the crazy notion they might swim to this far land. Nearest cousins wrote to her. They said our land is lost to war. We had to make for Tripoli. We could not stay there anymore. The bombs have pulled the buildings down. Grass and rubble strewn around. We looked for safety on the sea, shelter on a foreign ground. Some cousins live their lives in peace, while some must brave the angry seas. This country is where people come to make new lives, raise families. Cousins come from far away. We may see them any day. They cross the cold Atlantic Ocean to find the place where children play. They come to us from many lands. We reach out to grasp their hands. Friendship is a simple notion everyone may understand. Some cousins live their lives in peace, while some must brave the angry seas. This country is where people come to make new lives, raise families. When all the world is on the move, will we?
Good evening and welcome on this Wednesday evening. I'm Reverend Lara Cowton, and I'm the interim minister of the Unitarian Church of Vancouver, here at the corner of 49th and Oak, on the unceded or stolen lands of the Musqueam, Coast Salish, and Swallowtooth First Nations. We are grateful to those who came before us, and we are grateful to those with whom we share these lands today. We in this community acknowledge and recognize our own responsibility to work actively in support of Indigenous communities, sovereignty, and acknowledge the value of Indigenous knowledge and worldviews in leading us towards a respectful relationship with this place and with its ancestral occupants. Thank you for being here with us. I am honored to have been invited today to share in this very special ceremony. November 11th, in different parts of the world, is known as Armistice Day, Anzac Day, Veterans Day, and in Canada as Remembrance Day. And on this day, Canadians have traditionally paused for a moment of silence to honor and remember the men and women who have served and to continue to serve Canada during times of war, of conflict, and in peace. But there is so much more to this very complex, personal, and emotional story of this day. This evening, we hold in remembrance the stories of all of the voiceless victims of war, the tragic casualties, and those who endured unspeakable atrocities. We remember so that we may never forget the overwhelming and very human cost of war, so that we may never again take up arms, so that our children and planet will know a great and lasting peace. We have for you this evening a lovely selection of poetry and music, and I will begin with the poetry of Du Fu. Du Fu was a Chinese poet and politician of the Tang dynasty. He lived from 712 to 770. And along with Li Po, he is frequently called the greatest of the Chinese poets. And his life, like the whole country, was devastated by the 8-year-long An Lushan rebellion, in which an estimated 13 million people lost their lives. During this period of almost constant upheaval, Du Fu wrote this poem, Moonlit Night, Thinking of My Brothers. Warning drums have ended all travel. A lone goose cries across autumn borderlands. White dew begins tonight. This bright moon, bright there over my old village, my scattered brothers. And no home to ask, are they alive or dead? Letters never arrive. War comes and goes, then comes like this again. A second poem, Dulce et decorum est, is by the British poet Wilfred Owen, who wrote it following his experiences fighting in the trenches in northern France during World War I. Here is a gas poem done yesterday, he wrote to his mother from a recovery hospital in Scotland in 1917. Wilfred was 24 years old, 24. And a year later, he was killed in action, just 1 week before the Armistice of 11th November 1918 was signed. The poem was published posthumously in a 1920 book simply called Poems. Wilfred Owen's preface reads, "This book is not about heroes. My subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity. Dulce et decorum est pro patria more is a line taken from the Latin odes from the Roman poet Horace. It means, it is sweet and proper to die for one's country." Here is the poem. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. Till on haunting flares we turned our backs and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. I'm pleased to introduce now our first musical performance. Jim Edmondson and Madeline DeLittle singing their unique version of Buffy Sainte-Marie's amazing Universal Soldier. And like the rest of the songs that you'll hear tonight, it was selected and pre-recorded especially for this evening's ceremony, this evening of Let Peace Be Their Memorial. Thank you.
So this song is made up of two songs. One is Universal Soldier, Buffy Sainte-Marie, 1964, to which I've made some word adjustments and to which I've added the tune in the verses of Tom Waits's song Time, 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 which he wrote in 2001. And so now the song also has a chorus.
We're 5'2", we're 6'4". We fight with missiles and with spears. We're all of 61 and we're only 17. Been soldiers for 1,000 years. We're Catholics, we're Hindus, we're atheists, we're Jains. We're Buddhists, we're Muslims and we're Jews. We know we shouldn't kill, and we know we always will. Kill you for me, my friend, and me for you. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time, time to be loved. And it's time, time, time. We're fighting for Canada, we're fighting for Iran, we're fighting for USA. We're fighting for Hezbollah and Israel, and we think we'll put an end to war this way. We're fighting for democracy, we're fighting for the cause. We say it's for the good of all. We're the ones who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And we don't see the writing on the wall. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time, time that we love. And it's time, time, time. As without us, how would Hitler have condemned those that to cow? Without us, Caesar would have stood alone. We're the ones who give our bodies as weapons of the war. And without us, all this killing can go on. We're universal soldiers on both sides now. Our orders come from far away no more. They come from us, you and me, and friends, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time, time. And it's time, time.
I'm Teresa Gagne, co-founder of Vancouver Peace Poppies, which since 2008 has been distributing white poppies around Vancouver and across Canada. The poppies serve as a commemoration of civilian victims of war and encourage people to challenge the normalization of militarism and to take a hard look at the wide and devastating effects of war on our society and our planet. On the little cards which accompany each poppy, it says, "This year, wear a white poppy to commemorate all victims of war, to mourn the environmental devastation it causes, to reject war as a tool for social change, to call for dialogue and peaceful conflict resolution, to show your commitment to building a better future." Because remembering is important, but it isn't enough. Vancouver Peace Poppies has 3 main project activities that have evolved over the years. Distributing white lapel poppies, which we've been doing since 2008. Promoting peace education in schools, which we started doing in 2011. And hosting a peace-focused Remembrance Day ceremony, which we've been doing since 2016. So this is our 5th year. A bit about the history of the white poppy. Contrary to some impressions that you might get in the media, the white poppy is not a radical new idea dreamed up by spoiled Gen Yers. It's almost as old as the red poppy. The first white poppy was introduced in Britain in 1933, only 12 years after the red. Alarmed by the rising tide of post-war militarism, British women, many the wives, mothers, and sisters of men who had been killed, looked for a symbol to express their belief that, quote, "civilized nations should never again resort to the terrible and ineffectual method of war for the settlement of international disputes." The wearing of a white poppy on Armistice Day became a focus for the British peace movement, and the newly founded Peace Pledge Union undertook its promotion and distribution the next year in 1934. And they're still distributing them today. During many years of wearing handmade white poppies, my partner Denis and I were heartened by how the poppies seemed to get people talking about issues around Remembrance Day. Strangers, the cashier at the supermarket or somebody on the bus would say, "Oh, what's the white poppy for?" Or, "Oh, I've never seen a white poppy. What does that mean?" We decided that it would be worth making them more widely available and started Vancouver Peace Poppies with 50 handmade poppies in 2008. We imported our first 500 cloth poppies from Britain in 2009 and created a website, peacepoppies.ca, to help get the word out. BPP distributes poppies by donation as a consciousness raiser, not a fundraiser. Importing the poppies is fairly expensive. It costs us 90 to 95 cents a poppy, depending on the exchange rate. That money goes to the Peace Pledge Union in Britain and helps fund their excellent peace education work. Additional expenses for pins, postage, envelopes, and printing add to a total of about $125 a poppy. A suggested donation of $1 to $2 a poppy lets us cover our expenses and provide poppies at below cost to school and free poppies to disadvantaged groups in Vancouver. Vancouver Peace Poppies is a small kitchen table operation, but we're very proud of what we've accomplished. Last year, we distributed over 6,000 poppies across Canada and had a very successful schools campaign. Sorry. The growing demand for poppies highlighted, we felt, the need for Remembrance Day activities to reflect the diversity of Canadian perspectives on war and remembrance, and acknowledge the war experience of many immigrant Canadians. With this in mind, Vancouver Peace Poppies partnered with the BC Humanist Association in 2016 to co-host the first Let Peace Be Their Memorial ceremony, a Remembrance Day wreath-laying ceremony to commemorate refugees and other overlooked victims of war. The ceremony is patterned in some ways on the traditional Remembrance Day ceremony in that it is generally an outdoor public free ceremony with music, poetry, and wreath laying, but it's focus is much broader, and it fits in with really what our goal is, which is not to replace the red poppy and the traditional ceremonies, but to broaden the focus of Remembrance Day to reflect all victims of war. The first Armistice Day was in November 1919, 101 years ago, a year after the end of a war so huge and horrible that it was regarded by many as the war to end war. People thought that surely nothing this terrible could happen again. Surely governments and nations had learned from this horrific and wasteful experience. But instead, what we find is that almost 100 years later, there have been well over 300 more wars and close to 200 million people killed. And yet, every year, on November 11th, we get together and remember. But really, what have we accomplished with all our remembering if 200 people have died in war since then? Do we really think that was the torch that John McCrae and his comrades threw to us? Don't you think that they would be just appalled to think that they had lost their lives and that we had learned so little from it? There are lots of reasons to be against war, that it's immoral, that it's wasteful, but really, I think the inarguable one now is that it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The reasons that were given by our governments and our press for why we have to enter this conflict or that conflict are that it will, quote, make the world safer, it will spread democracy, it will increase human rights for persecuted minorities. But those reasons aren't valid. War isn't working. If we look at the most recent 20 years of war in the Middle East and we ask, is Canada safer? Is the US safer? Is the Middle East safer? Is the world safer? No, it's more dangerous. Is it more democratic? No. So all those deaths, all that money spent, all that waste hasn't really achieved its stated goals. And I think we have to raise our voices and say, your way isn't working. People have said to me, well, if you don't have another solution, then how can you criticize what we're doing? And it's true. I don't have the solution. I don't know how ISIS can be removed from being a world problem, how oppression can be stopped. But I offer you this analogy. Suppose we were spending billions of dollars on a drug to treat cancer, and we looked at the evidence, and we found out that not only did it not work, but it actually made people sicker. What I hope would happen is this. We would say, okay, pull that drug off the market. We're going to stop funding prescriptions for that drug because it's harmful. Even if we didn't have a better drug, we'd put more money into research, into finding an effective treatment. It's the same kind of thing here. What we have to say is war doesn't work. We need to put money into finding something that will work, into training people who can go into a situation or country, hear what the different sides have to say, learn what the roots of the problem are, and talk with them about how they think they could come to live together and work together on a solution. We need to be training around the world hundreds and thousands of people with those skills and having them available, not a peacekeeping force or training for the military or the police, but a mediation resource that's available to communities and countries to deal with the difficult situations that are always going to happen. But really, I think we need to commit ourselves to counting all the different costs of military conflict, the social costs, the environmental costs, the desperate refugees, the lost potential of school children, women traumatized, abducted, or sexually assaulted, conscientious objectors who sometimes pay with their lives for standing up and refusing to fight, the psychological costs of PTSD on veterans and civilians. We really need to include all those things, and we owe it not just ourselves. I would say we even owe it to our military to do so. If we're going to ask somebody to risk not only their physical health, but their mental health on a military endeavor, we'd better be very sure that it's likely to succeed and that in the cost-benefit analysis, it's worth the costs. I don't see any disrespect to the military in saying, let's count all the costs of war and evaluate if it's really going to achieve what we want to achieve. To me, if we don't do that, if we don't find a better way, we will really have broken faith with those who died and those who will continue to die. Thank you. And now I'm going to read a poem For many years, Edna St. Vincent Millay was one of the most successful and respected poets in America. During World War I, Millay was a dedicated and active pacifist, and in the 1930s, alarmed by the rise of fascism, she wrote against it in poems like this one, Conscientious Objector. After the start of World War II, she abandoned her pacifist stance and in 1940 advocated for the U.S. to enter the war against the Axis and became an ardent supporter of the war effort. She later worked with the Writers' War Board to create propaganda, including poetry, though I'm glad to say that these efforts damaged rather than improved her reputation in poetry circles. Conscientious Objector. I shall die, but that is all that I shall do for death. I hear him leading his horse out of the stall. I hear the clatter on the barn floor. He is in haste. He has business in Cuba, business in the Balkans, many calls to make this morning. But I will not hold the bridle while he clinches the girth, and he may mount by himself. I will not give him a leg up. Though he flick my shoulders with his whip, I will not tell him which way the fox ran. With his hoof on my breast, I will not tell him where the black boy hides in the swamp. I shall die, but that is all that I shall do for death. I am not on his payroll. I will not tell him the whereabouts of my friends, nor of my enemies either. Though he promise me much, I will not map him the route to any man's door. Am I a spy in the land of the living, that I should deliver men to death? Brother, the password and plans of our city are safe with me. Never through me shall you be overcome. And now I would like to introduce Fraser Union's first song. Roger Holdstock and Kathy Griffith performed for the first time at our ceremony last year, and their impression was so positive that Roger actually contacted me in September to ask if we'd be holding a ceremony this year. Harmony singing in a time of COVID is challenging, so they arranged to get together outdoors with fellow Fraser Union member Barry Truder to record some special performances just for us. Their first song is about something we all need these days. It's called The Music of Healing.
Beat the drums, it frightens the children. Don't sing the songs about winning and losing. Sit down beside me, the green fields are bleeding. Sing me the music of healing. Sing me a song of a lover returning. The darker the night, the nearer the morning. Bring me the news of a new day that's dawning. Sing me the music of healing. Ah, the heart's a wonder, stronger than the guns of thunder. Even when we're torn asunder, love will come again. Sometimes the truth's like a hair in the cornfields. You know that it's there, but you can't put your arms round it. All you can do is follow its footprints. Sing me the music of healing. How could I know I could be so contented to know I was wrong after all of my rambles? I've learned to be hard, and I've learned how to tremble. Sing me the music of healing. Ah, the heart's a wonder, stronger than the guns of thunder. Even when we're torn asunder, love will come again. how the cycle of vengeance keeps turning, till each other's sorrows and songs we are learning. Peace is the prize for those who are daring. Sing me the music of healing. Time is your friend, it'll cure all your sorrows. But how can I wait for another tomorrow? One step today, and 1,000 will follow. Sing me the music of healing. Ah, the heart's a wonder, stronger than the guns of thunder. Even when we're torn asunder, love will come again. Ah, the heart's a wonder, stronger than the guns of thunder. Even when we're torn asunder, love will come again.
Our previous poem was from the time between the First and Second World Wars. This poem is from the Second World War. Although he was a prolific poet, a prolific writer, the British poet and author Henry Reed is mostly known for a single poem, Naming of Parts, one of a series he wrote in 1942 called Lessons of War. On the surface, it's simply a witty parody of the British Army's basic training during World War II, which suffered from a serious lack of equipment. The first voice is a droning instructor, and the second, perhaps, a distracted recruit. But the observation of the simple beauty of plants and insects also serve as a striking critique of the cold, technical, and unemotional world of wartime military service. While the soldiers work at becoming proficient, destructive killers, the natural world goes about its business of creation and procreation, lacking nothing. Naming of Parts by Henry Reed. Today we have naming of parts. Yesterday we had daily cleaning, and tomorrow morning we shall have what to do after firing. But today we have naming of parts. Japonica glistens like coral in all of the neighboring gardens, and today we have naming of parts. This is the lower swing swivel, and this is the upper sling swivel, whose use you will see when you are given your slings. And this is the piling swivel, which in your case you have not got. The branches which hold the gardens in their silent, eloquent gestures, which in our case we have not got. This is a safety catch, which is always released with an easy flick of the thumb. And please do not let me see anyone using his finger. You can do it quite easy if you have any strength in your thumb. The blossoms are fragile and motionless, never letting anyone see any of them using their finger. And this, you can see, is the bolt. The purpose of this is to open the breech, as you see. We can slide it rapidly backwards and forwards. We call this easing the spring. And rapidly, backwards and forwards, the early bees are assaulting and fumbling the flowers. They call it easing the spring. They call it easing the spring. It is perfectly easy if you have any strength in your thumb, like the bolt and the breech and the cocking piece and the point of balance, which in our case we have not got, and the almond blossom, silent in all of the gardens, and the bees going backwards and forwards. For today we have naming of parts. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Kenneth Christie, Program Head of the Human Security and Peacebuilding Graduate Programs at Royal Roads University. Ken is a political scientist, author, editor, and international academic who has taught and conducted research at universities in the US, Singapore, South Africa, Norway, and Dubai. Working all over the world has given him a unique perspective on peace development and human security. His work has focused on issues of human rights, security, and democratization. He's widely published as an author and editor with 11 books to his credit. These days, Ken is working on issues of human security and its links to ethnic and state formation and failure in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. He's also exploring issues of de-radicalization, terrorism, human rights, and corporate social responsibility. A busy man, as you can see. But tonight, he's going to share his insights on how and why human security can provide the key to sustainable peace in the 21st century. And I think this is a perfect transition from my own talk.
Well, hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to start off this talk with a quote. We have learned that we cannot live alone, at peace, that our own well-being is dependent on the well-being of other nations far away. We have learned that we must live as men and not as ostriches, nor as dogs in the manger. We have learned to be citizens of the world, members of the human community. And that quote is from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the 32nd President of the United States. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Christie, and I'm a professor at Royal Roads University in Victoria, where I run a master's degree program in human security and peace building. This program has been successful at sending out young and old Canadians, as well as international students all over the world to pursue humanitarian action, peace building, and conflict resolution, among other aspects. We have former students in conflict and post-conflict zones all over Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. We have many who are working for institutions here in Canada, striving to put into practice ideals of human security and peace building. Here at this remembrance ceremony, I would like to talk about the relationship of human security and peace. For as long as anyone can remember, the idea of peace has always been the opposite to that of war. Ancient scholars like Sun Tzu in China, Thucydides in Greece, and Machiavelli in Italy, among others, saw war as part of the human condition, ingrained within our ancestral makeup. On the other hand, many of the world's great religions preached ideas of peace and non-violence, though some, a minority of their adherents, practiced violence and committed atrocities, and still do. For much of human history, peace was simply seen as the absence of conflict. This changed after the Second World War and the destruction caused by these wars. The 20th century was an age of extremes, described by historians like Eric Hobsbawm, who estimated that something like 187 million people died in conflicts between 1914 and 1991. A more accurate estimate for the entire 20th century is 231 million people dead. Early on in the 20th century, even before the details of mass genocide were revealed, one author had already argued that the curse of privilege to be the most devastating or most bloody war century belongs to the 20th. In 1/4 century, imposed upon the population a blood tribute far greater than that imposed by any of the whole centuries combined. The devastation did not end, of course, with the end of wars for ordinary people. Conflict did not end with the end of the Cold War. It simply increased within states, what we call in political science intrastate conflict or civil wars. Genocide, war, revolutions, poverty, anti-colonial movements, terrorism, etc., all emerged to kill millions, most of them civilians. Millions more were displaced, they became refugees and migrants seeking new homes. 90% of the victims of all of these are typically civilian. Now, after the devastation of the two world wars by 1945, people started to look more closely at how they could approach peace and security and war more scientifically. Many were frightened by the specter of nuclear war, which could have the potential to make mankind extinct. Peace became not just the absence of conflict, or negative peace, but a positive peace, reordering society and its priorities to satisfy basic human needs and to address sources of structural violence. And all sorts of ideas came into practice: conflict resolution, negotiation, justice, mediation, and peace building, to name a few. And what I would like to say a bit about today, human security. So the second part of this is really, what is human security? What does it mean? Well, as Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, said, human security in its broadest sense embraces far more than the absence of violent conflict. It encompasses human rights, good governance, access to education and healthcare, and ensuring that everyone has opportunities and choices to fulfill his or her potential. So firstly, human security is the protection of vulnerable individuals to threats and dangers posed from their environment. The concept is interdisciplinary, holistic, and has a normative bias in favor of the individual in a similar way as human rights. It has two main components: an expansive component, which we call freedom from want, which refers to basic needs such as food, shelter, and development, while a narrow version, freedom from fear, includes identity needs and physical and personal safety. Both components are interrelated. Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, in turn discussed the notion of development as freedom, reinforcing the connection between freedom from fear and freedom from want. In addition, and one of the critiques of the idea is that human security is a relatively new concept. The framework first emerged as a term in the 1980s as a riposte, a rebuttal to the version of national security. But it was not until 1994 that it really gained credence. The main difference seems to be over a difference in definition. Freedom from fear is different to a broader expanded view, freedom from want. Both of these ideas were developed in the United Nations Development Programme, Human Development Programme report of 1994. According to the report, the two components were explained as freedom from fear. The narrower of the two seeks to understand human security as protecting individuals from violent conflicts, while at the same time seeing these threats as strongly associated with poverty, lack of state capacity, and other forms of inequities. And secondly, freedom from want, on the other hand, this view argues that threats involved in human security should be expanded to include hunger, poverty, disease, natural environmental disasters, because all of these are inseparable ideas in addressing the roots of insecurity, and also because they typically kill far more people than war, genocide, and terrorism combined. So this freedom from want develops the focus beyond violence against individuals, with emphasis on human, social, and economic development as the optimum way to protect individual security and ensure that peace is maintained. Now, Canada and other countries like Japan and Norway also played a very large part in the development of these ideas. I argue in this conversation that human security encompasses both as complementary. They are structurally linked together. The second term, however, is more broadly related to development, an umbrella that takes in all sorts of issues such as terrorism, refugees, democracy, peacekeeping, development, and many other types of agendas. It refers to the fact that at the end of the day, individual human beings are entitled to security within the states they live in, and therefore challenges this notion of national security as the overall framework or modus operandi for states. While states have always typically defined security in this way, that is, that their interests are paramount, human security argues that it is individuals who need to be protected, especially when they're usually on the receiving end of state violence. By protecting human security, you're protecting state security. And good governance means protecting human security, making people feel safe and allowing them to pursue their aspirations. States, while they still exercise the monopoly of violence that defines them, have had to react to extra state actors who threaten them, such as guerrillas, terrorists, social movements, amongst others, who may also use violence in their repertoire. It is also when people feel that their human rights are protected and they feel secure in this that we are exercising good human security and good governance. And some states have adopted tenets of this. Canada and Japan, for instance, both strong proponents of human security, have incorporated features of UN versions of human security into their foreign policy agendas at different times. And we should remember that despite all the conflicts around the world, we have had some successes. For instance, including a peace agreement in Northern Ireland in 1998 after decades of political violence and terrorism. Secondly, a peace agreement in Colombia between the government and the revolutionary forces in 2016. Thirdly, the peace agreement in 1995 with Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Balkan states. And fourthly, peace agreements between East Timor and Indonesia in 1999. These are just a few of the examples of how we've come to peace through negotiation, through mediation, through actually talking to each other and having a conversation about the role of peace and conflict. And aside from these and many more, we have developed conventions on nuclear weapons, on women and human rights, on children, etc., all to mention a few in this period. Now, just to conclude these few remarks, at the beginning of the talk, I mentioned a quote by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who urged Americans to embrace the globalization of the world by becoming more collectively involved in the world and not acting alone. It will take this combination of governments and international institutions to work together in a human security fashion to create peace, not as individual actors, but as collectives who share the same values. So far, the most powerful country, the United States, has opted out of its international obligations from climate change to the International Criminal Court and trade. And as the most powerful country, there must be some way to bring it back in, and perhaps the recent change in political power in the United States will do this. We need a US that focuses on human security over militarization and conflict overseas, and domestically in the treatment of its migrants and marginalized at home. It's clear that the standard government or state versions of security have not worked in creating peace. More recently, the efforts to put up drawbridges by the state, pursue anti-immigrant policies, and prevent the peaceful movement of people around the world, either fleeing from war or seeking to improve their economic conditions, has not worked. Borders need to be open instead of being closed. While COVID-19 may, for safety reasons, prevent the open movement of people, it will not last forever. Populism and other ideologies will fade because they create conflict and divide people. Human security in its different forms will always work to bring people together to resolve conflicts, protect the vulnerable, and create a lasting and sustainable environment in which peace can flourish. If the 20th century was the age of human insecurity, which for millions and millions of people who lived in it, then we should aim to make the 21st century the age of human security and peace. Peace is about freedom from fear. Peace is about freedom from want. The pursuit of human security for everyone is a way to achieve peace in a sustainable form, because all of these aspects are interrelated and connected, and therefore I am optimistic we can move forward to a secure and peaceful future for all.
Well, Ken's given us a lot to think about, but also some hope that there is work taking us in the right direction. We now have another song by Jim and Madeline, Shirla Shalom. As both life and musical partners, they had it a bit easier than Fraser Union. They were actually able to harmonize in the same room. This song has a chorus, so please sing along. And following that, Nan Gregory will read some more poetry, bringing us up through the years. Thank you.
So this is a Israeli peace song. There is such a thing as an Israeli peace movement. The song was written after the Six-Day War by Yaakov Roblet and been sung ever since. Ironically, the song was sung by Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 when he was prime minister. He had been one of the generals in the Six-Day War, and he was assassinated about 10 minutes after he sung this song with Shimon Peres at that rally.
The sun is up, the morning shines in through the open door. But the finest prayers we offer up can bring us back no more. For he whose flame has been put out, who's buried in the ground, no bitter cries will wake him now. He rests without a sound. No one here can bring us back from the darkness of the grave, with the joy of battles fought and won, and tributes to the brave. Sing a song now, a song of peace. Don't whisper all those prayers. Sing a song now, a song of peace, and sing it loud and clear. Let the sun come flowing in, and let the fallen rest. Look through the weave of bright young flowers, don't say towards the past. Raise your eyes in hope again, and not through the sights of a gun. Sing a song of love and hope, don't say a day will come. Go bring in that day right now, for it is not a dream. Don't sing about wars and victories and battles that we've seen. Sing a song now, a song of peace. Don't whisper all those prayers. Sing a song now, a song of peace, and sing it loud and clear.
That was beautiful. They always sing such beautiful songs. Well, I feel really honored to be able to read a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, poet, scholar, and tireless anti-war activist. He challenges us with his conviction that we cannot expect a peaceful world if we cannot find peace in our own hearts. The poem is called Recommendation. Promise me this day, promise me now while the sun is overhead exactly at the zenith. Promise me, even as they strike you down with a mountain of hatred and violence, even as they step on you and crush you like a worm, even as they dismember and disembowel you, remember, man is not our enemy. The only thing worthy of you is compassion, invincible limitless, unconditional. Hatred will never let you face the beast in man. One day, when you face this beast alone with your courage intact, your eyes kind, untroubled, even if nobody sees them, out of your smile will bloom a flower. And those who love you will behold you across 10,000 worlds of birth and dying. And when he heard that his dear little follower, Nat Chi Mai, had set herself on fire and died protesting the American war in Vietnam, he added these 4 lines. I will go on with bent head, knowing that love has become eternal. On the long, rough road, the sun and moon will continue to shine. And this is what he wrote about writing that poem. He says, I wrote this poem in 1965, especially for the young people in the School of Youth for Social Service who risk their lives every day during the war, recommending them to die without hatred. Some had already been killed violently, and I cautioned the others against hating. Our enemy is our anger, hatred, greed, fanaticism, and discrimination against men. If you die because of violence, you must meditate on compassion in order to forgive those who kill you. When you die realizing this state of compassion, you are truly a child of the awakened one. Even if you are dying in oppression, shame, and violence, if you can smile with forgiveness, you have great power. Boy, he sets a high standard. To follow those wonderful, thought-provoking words, we have a wonderful, thoughtful song from Fraser Union, See Myself in You.
If I met you on the corner, would I know you as you are? Would I take you for a stranger and walk past you in the door? If you call me, would I hear you? Could I walk away too soon? If I linger for a moment, would I see myself in you? If I fought you as a soldier, if I had you in my sights, would you ask me to remember who imagined I was right? If you witnessed my surrender, do I know what I would do? Would you hurt me like my brother? Would I see myself in you? Well, I dreamed my end was near. I was almost gone. If I dreamed a dream from here, can I still come home? If you called me, would I hear you? Would I walk away too soon? If you held me like my lover? Would I see myself in you? If you held me like my mother, would I see myself in you? Oh, hi!
Our next poem was written by Matty Stepanek. Matty was 11 years old when he wrote this poem on the day of September 11th, 2001. He died 2 years later of dysautonomic mitochondrial myopathy. We need to stop. Just stop. Stop for a moment before anybody says or does anything that may hurt anyone else. We need to be silent, just silent. Silent for a moment before we forever lose the blessing of songs that grow in our hearts. We need to notice. Just notice. Notice for a moment before the future slips away into ashes and dust of humility. Stop, be silent, and notice. In so many ways, we are the same. Our differences are unique treasures. We are a mosaic of gifts to nurture, to offer, to accept. We need to be, just be. Be for a moment kind and gentle, innocent and trusting, like children and lambs, never judging or vengeful like the judging and vengeful. And now, let us pray, differently yet together, before there is no earth, no life, no chance for peace. Wise words from a little guy. Now Jim and Madeleine will sing a song written by Malvina Reynolds and Pete Seeger, From Way Up Here.
The song is From Way Up Here and written by Malvina Reynolds and Pete Seeger way back in 1962. From Way Up Here.
From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball of rock and sea and sand, no bigger than my hand. From way up here, the earth looks very small. They shouldn't fight at all down there, up on that little stair. The time is short, but life is just a day. You think they'd find a way, you think they'd get along and fill their magic days with song. La 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 la. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball, so small, so beautiful and clear. Their time is short, a life is just a day. Must be a better way to use the time that runs among the distant suns. La 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 la. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball, so small, so beautiful and deep.
I love that song. So now we're going to move into what I think of as really the heart of Let Peace Be Their Memorial, the wreath laying ceremony. In our usual outdoor ceremony, we would be placing 11 universal wreaths, followed by a number of community wreaths. But in tonight's modified program, we'll be placing only 6 universal wreaths. These handcrafted wreaths were custom designed to recognize often overlooked victims of war, those groups whose suffering recurs across conflicts, continents, and centuries. Our first wreath will be for children, and before it is placed, I wanted to read another poem. To an Iraqi Child, for Ali Ismail Abbas, by David Krieger. So you wanted to be a doctor. It was not likely that your dreams would have come true anyways. We didn't intend for our bombs to find you. They are smart bombs, but they didn't know you wanted to be a doctor. They didn't know anything about you, and they know nothing of love. They cannot be trusted with dreams. They know only how to find their targets and explode in fulfillment. They are gray metal casings with violent hearts, doing only what they were created to do. It isn't their fault they found you. Perhaps you were not meant to be a doctor. 12-year-old Ali Abbas drew medical attention after being severely injured in a nighttime aerial missile attack near Baghdad during the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. 2 American missiles landed on his family's home, killing his father, his pregnant mother, his brother, and 13 other family members. Both of Ali's arms had to be amputated, and he was severely burned. He was later transferred to Britain and got hospital care there. This wreath was made by local elementary school students who literally lent their hands to make the background circle of green handprints to commemorate children, like Ali, who are killed, injured, or orphaned by war. In addition to those physical losses, we mourn the lost potential of an estimated 50 million children whose education is currently disrupted by war. Some of the luckier ones end up in our local schools, but others spend their entire youth in refugee camps with no access to formal education or are forced to abandon their schooling to help support desperate families. The next wreath represents refugees fleeing conflict, the largest group of civilian war victims, and the one most in the news these days. The UNHCR currently estimates that there are 79.5 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, of whom 26 million are refugees. Canadians pride ourselves on our generosity, but in fact 73% of refugees are hosted in neighboring countries. Turkey alone hosts 3.6 million refugees. Canada and other destination countries gain from the skills and diversity that refugees bring, but their homelands suffer a corresponding loss. Our next wreath is for dedicated to women raped and victimized in wartime, a crime as old and terrible as war itself. Its symbols recognize both women's strength and their vulnerability. Conflict zones and refugee camps can be especially dangerous for women who may be assaulted or pressured to trade sexual services for food, safe passage, or other necessities of life. Our next wreath is for Indigenous victims of genocide and cultural destruction. From first contact to the present day, Indigenous people worldwide have been the victims of both overt and covert wars on their cultures and existence. Our wreath of local red cedar is symbolically wound with invasive English ivy, a plant famous for its habit of suppressing and killing native vegetation. On the attached leaves are some of the brutal tactics Indigenous people have faced and continue to face. This oil-soaked wreath represents the environmental devastation caused by war. Military land use for bases and training and storage often displace people from their lands and homes. Military activity uses solvents, fuels, and other toxic chemicals which can leach into the environment and remain there for decades or even centuries. Unexploded ordnance like landmines can render farmland and cropland and recreational lands unusable. Defoliation caused by products like Agent Orange not only kills the plants but also causes devastating soil erosion. Depleted uranium can contaminate land for centuries. The US used 100 tons in a 3-week period in Iraq. Abandoned livestock and crops, wildlife eaten by desperate people, intentional flooding and fires set by troops or remotely. These are all ways in which war affects the environment. And a major one, the huge military blueprint, is a major contributor to global warming, and one we should remember when discussing local pipeline and tanker issues. Our last universal wreath is labeled for peace because, in addition to mourning what has been lost to war, we're also here to show our commitment to work for peace and a better world for all. Through it, we also recognize the strength and commitment of those who have dared to resist war and the persecution they often face. Whether motivated by religious faith, secular moral values, or a practical belief that war is wasteful and ineffectual, we honor their efforts and their memory. This final, hopeful wreath with its colorful doves is dedicated to all peace builders, past, present, and future. That's the end of our peace wreath laying portion of the ceremony, but we have more music and poetry for you. Wendy Bryan will be reading the next poems. Thank you.
This wry but hopeful poem is by the American poet and peace activist Richard Swanson. It received an honorable mention in the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation's 2004 poetry contest. After it, Fraser Union will sing their version of Peace Call, a wonderful song with lyrics by Woody Guthrie, set to music by Eliza Gilkyson. Please join in the chorus. But first, wishes for the next war. That the dogs of war on the eve of battle share their fleas with their general socks. That codes of smart bombs be sent to dyslexic pilots who drop all their ordnances into the sea. That tanks on the road to glory return to base with the hiccups. That soldiers on opposite sides in separate tents get sent by scrambled mail the photos of each other's families. That field commanders lose interest. That subsequent orders begin with, "If you'd like to." That maps of battle crumble like manna from heaven. That the generals dance for peace. That the checks for weapons bounce. That the vultures starve from lack of spoils. That the troops sleep in this morning, tomorrow, and as long as it suits them, knowing the sweetness of time on one brief earth.
Open your hearts to a world of peace, to the dawn of understanding. Take away that woeful shadow looming on your wall. Walk in the streets of peace, my friends, in the strength of our great spirit. Get ready for my bugle call of can hear the bugles sounding, roaming around my land, my city and my towns. Peace, 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 I can hear the voices ringing louder while my bugle calls for peace. Thick war clouds may cast their shadows, darkening the world around us. In our search for peace, those dark illusions fall. Walk and sing along the way, embrace the ones around you. Get ready for my bugle call. Peace, I can hear the bugles sounding, roaming around my land, my city and my town. Peace, 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 I can hear the voices ringing louder while my bugle calls for peace. If those war storms fill our hearts with 1,000 kinds of worry, keep to the road of peace. We'll overcome our fear. Walk in the sun and look around to find the strength in numbers. Get ready for my bugle call of peace, I can hear the bugles sounding, roaming around my land, my cities and my towns. Peace, 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 I can hear the voices ringing louder while my bugle calls for peace. Clear my house of the shades of fear, turn to the friends around me. With my mind on peace, I'll greet you one and all. I'll work, I'll strive, I'll dance, I'll sing in peace, in youthful spirit. Get ready for my bugle call. I can hear the bugles sounding, roaming around my voices ringing louder while my bugle calls for peace. Peace, peace, peace. I can hear the bugle sounding, roaming around my land, my cities and my towns. Peace, peace, peace. I can hear the voices ringing louder while my bugle calls for peace. Louder while my bugle calls for peace.
In these three short poems from her 2018 poetry collection, Liberty Walks Naked, expatriate Syrian French poet Maryam Al-Mazri draws on social media images of the civil war in her home country to create powerful poetry that speaks of both the suffering of the Syrian people and their passion for justice. Although Syrian writers risk kidnapping, death, or imprisonment, they continue to speak out. Violence is so pervasive in Syria that silence is no longer seen as a road to safety. Even poets living outside Syria face intimidation, and Mazri says she has received death threats and had loved ones in Syria forced into hiding. These poems were translated by Theo Dorgan. Have you seen him? He carried his child in his arms and walked masterfully, head high, back straight. How happy and proud the child would be, thus carried in his father's arms, if only he was alive. Selmia, Selmia, peaceful, peaceful. They went singing peace, bare torsos and clean hands. Horia, Horia, liberty, liberty. They marched, shouting liberty, shirtless and roses in hands. Yes, it's a song that shook the solid core of fear and dropped the mask of the crow. Daily life. A long line in front of the bakery. Sounds of explosions. Everything flees. The very trees pull up their roots and run. Except hunger. Hunger doesn't care and continues waiting to buy bread. Jim Edmondson and Madeline DeLittle will now sing the final song in tonight's program before the Reverend Laura Carlton makes her closing remarks.
Song of Peace, Finlandia, the original tune was written by Sibelius in 1899, and then Lloyd Stone added these lyrics in 1934, and then in 2004, Jim changed some of the lyrics to be more appropriate.
This is a song for people of all nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. Here is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as fine and true as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. So here's my song for people of all nations, a song of peace for your land and for mine.
I'm very grateful to all of you for being here this evening, that we may hold these painful truths and also carry this precious hope together. I'd like to say a heartfelt thank you to all the people who participated in bringing this ceremony together this evening, starting with the singers that you just heard from. We have from Fraser Union, Roger Holdstock and Kathy Griffiths and Barry Trotter, and Jim Edmondson and Madeline DeLittle. Beautiful music, thank you. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Kenneth Christie of the Royal Roads University, and all of our wreath layers and poetry readers, Denis Laplante and Catherine Hembling, Nan Gregory, Wendy Bryan, Lynn Armstrong, thank you. And of course, where would we be without our tech crew? Stars that they are, Christian Malcolm and Rob Taylor, and keeping us safe and clean, Karen Hertz, our custodian. Thank you very much. And a very, very special thank you to Lynn Armstrong for bringing the Vancouver Peace Poppies and the Vancouver Unitarians together to present tonight's special program. And one more. Very special thank you to Teresa Gagne, co-founder of the Canadian White Poppy Movement in 2008, and whose remarkable organizing talent and dedication made this evening happen. Thank you, Teresa. So in closing, I would like to share a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for mankind to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to oppression and violence. Mankind must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love." Go. Carry peace and love within you and out into the world. Let peace be their memorial.